Today's story is a little bit spooky, so I left the lights off. It originates in Mexico, but eventually it was known all over Latin America, and now it's known pretty much all over the world. This is the story of La Llorona. It's one of the stories of La Llorona. This story has just about as many incarnations as there are people telling it. The story I'm going to tell you today is my favorite story of La Llorona because it ties itself back to actual historical events, and also to one specific historical figure. La Leyenda de la Llorona, the legend of the Weeping Woman. In 1505, a lovely baby girl was born to an Aztec family, and they named her La Malinche. When La Malinche is about 10, her father dies, and her mother remarries. And in that society, there was no room for little stepdaughters left over from dead husbands past. So La Malinche was sold to the Mayans as a slave girl. Then, in 1519, Hernando Cortez lands in the New World and begins his conquest of Mexico. But the first thing he needs is an interpreter who can talk to the political leaders of the day for him. And guess who knows both Aztec and Mayan because of her slavery? La Malinche is baptized as the Christian Doña Marina, and she never leaves Cortez's side again. Almost every Mexican depiction of Hernando Cortez that we have, she is sitting at his right hand, because she was so invaluable as an interpreter for him. Cortez actually wrote to one of his friends that he said that apart from God, Doña Marina was the most critical person in taking over Mexico. But she wasn't just an interpreter, if you know what I mean. And later on she has a son from Hernando Cortez. And this is where the legend and the historical facts start to diverge. In actual record, La Malinche only had one son by Cortez, but the La Llorona legend insists that there were 2 children. So, those people who believe that this is the connection simply make that one son into a set of twins, so now there's 2. The story from here on in is pretty much sheer myth. We don't have any records for this. The King and Queen of Spain want Cortez to come back to Europe. Cortez doesn't want to go back to Europe, and he tells the King and Queen that he's afraid he'll lose the colonies that he's made if he has to go back to Spain. Well, the King and Queen aren't really all that thrilled about that. So the Spanish royals come up with this brilliant plan to get Cortez back to Spain. They send this really sexy Spanish lady over to the colonies to seduce Cortez and bring him back to Spain. And it works like a charm. Cortez falls for it hook, line, and sinker. And so he calls La Malinche and says, "I'm going back to Spain, and I'm taking our sons with me." And she's like, "Well, what about me?" And he's like, "Oh, you're not coming." See, La Malinche wasn't actually his wife. She was just a concubine, and since he didn't need an interpreter in Spain, he had no use for her. But he still wanted his boys to go with him, so he was going to take them away from her. Well, no mother wants to have her babies taken away from her, so La Malinche steals the babies in the middle of the night and tries to make a break for it. Well, she makes it all the way to the bank of the lake that Mexico City is now built on, but Cortez's soldiers are right on her heels, and she knows that she's completely trapped. So as soon as the soldiers have her surrounded, she reaches into her shirt and pulls out a dagger, stabs both of her children in the chest, and throws their dead bodies into the water. While we don't have any record of La Malinche's death, her name has become synonymous with betrayal for her role in conquering Mexico at the hand of Cortez. First sightings of La Llorona in Mexico happen about 20 years after the death of La Malinche, and she's described as a woman who wears white, with a thin veil over her face, and she's always crying and weeping and screaming, mis hijos, which means my children, wailing and mourning for the children that she killed. And Weeping Woman walks through the streets, screaming and wailing until she comes to the edge of the lake, where she disappears into the water. After that, sightings of La Llorona start happening all over Latin America, and she always has the same few qualities. She is always a ghostly woman, she is always weeping, and she is usually tied to a body of water. If you're a little kid in Latin America, you know better than to play near the riverbanks at night, because La Llorona will get you and she'll take you away to replace the children that she lost by her own hand. So that is the story of the Weeping Woman, the woman who mourns for the babies that she killed. and its possible ties to the story of La Malinche, the woman who facilitated Hernando Cortez's conquest of Latin America.